All right, today we're going to break down one of the absolute cornerstones of economics, the law of supply. This is the rule that pretty much dictates what gets made, how much of it is out there for us to buy. So yeah, it's a big deal. Let's jump right in.
So let's start with a really basic question. Just picture anyone who makes or sells a product. It could be a massive corporation or just your neighbor selling stuff on Etsy. What is the one thing, the main driver that makes them say, yeah, I'm going to make and sell more of this?
It all comes down to one simple word: profit. That's it. That potential to make money is the fundamental incentive. It's the engine that powers the whole system and gets goods onto the shelves.
Okay, but how do they actually figure that out? What's the quick and dirty calculation that happens in a producer's head before they decide to sell anything at all?
Well, the logic is actually super straightforward. A producer is basically weighing two things. On one hand, the price they can sell an item for, and on the other, how much it costs them to make just one more of that item. As long as the price they can get is higher than the cost to make it, it's a go.
And here's where it gets really interesting. It's not just about making a profit. It's about how big that profit is. The wider that gap between the selling price and the cost to produce, the more motivated a company is to make as much of that product as they possibly can.
This connection between price and the willingness to sell is so reliable, so consistent, that economists have turned it into a core principle. Let's take a look at the official law.
Before we get all formal with the textbook definition, let's just boil it down to common sense. The law of supply is basically this. If you found out you could sell whatever you make for double the price tomorrow, wouldn't you want to make a whole lot more of it? Of course you would. And that right there is the law in a nutshell.
And here it is, the official version. Now that little phrase at the beginning, other things remaining constant, is super important. It just means we're assuming that stuff like production costs and technology aren't changing for now. With that in mind, it's a direct relationship. Price up, quantity up. Price down, quantity down. Simple as that.
So how do economists actually use this idea? Well, they like to visualize it. Let's see how they take this concept from a boring old table and turn it into a really useful graph.
What you're looking at here is called a supply schedule. It's really just a simple chart that shows how much of a product a producer is willing to sell at different prices. And you can see the pattern right away, right? At a price of just $1, they're only supplying 5 kilos. But crank that price up to 5, and suddenly they're willing to supply a whopping 65 kilos.
Now, when we start plotting those numbers from the schedule onto a graph, a really clear picture starts to emerge. See how as the price moves up, the quantity bar just gets taller and taller? It's the perfect visual of that direct relationship we've been talking about.
And if you connect those points, boom, you get the classic supply curve. That upward slope from left to right tells you the entire story in a single glance. The higher the price, the more producers are willing to sell. It's that simple.
Okay, so that all makes sense for one producer. But what happens when you've got a whole market with maybe hundreds or even thousands of different producers? How does that work?
You might think this would be really complicated, but the idea is surprisingly simple. To get the total market supply, you just pick a price, let's say $3. Then you just add up what every single producer out there is willing to sell at that $3 price point. You do that for every possible price, and you've just mapped a supply for the entire market.
Yep, it's really just a big addition problem. You take what producer A is supplying, add what producer B is supplying, tack on producer C's supply, and you keep going for every single producer in the market. The grand total of all of that, that's your market supply.
Now, the law of supply is an incredibly powerful tool for understanding the economy. But it's also important to remember that the real world, well, it can be a little messier.
So in the real world, it's not always this perfect, clean line on a graph. There are definitely exceptions. Time, for example, is a huge factor. It's way easier for a factory to ramp up production over 6 months than it is to do it by tomorrow morning. And of course, other big things, like a huge leap in technology or a sudden spike in the cost of materials, can change the whole game.
And there you have it, the law of supply. But here's the thing, it's only one side of the economic coin. The real action, the real magic, happens when the producer's willingness to sell slams right into the customer's desire to buy. So what happens when supply finally meets demand? Well, we'll have to get into that next time.